On the telephone line, I welcome to the program legendary heavy metal singer and songwriter who is known by the European press as the voice of melodic metal. I welcome to the show Rob Rock. Rob, Brian C., honor to have you.
Hey, honored to be here. Glad to talk to you today.
My pleasure, Rob. Rob, you've been involved in music now on a pro level for about 40 years. Growing up, was this your dream and goal to one day be that rock star you've become?
Yeah, actually, it's always been that dream. I started out as a drummer, thinking I might be Don Brewer or Neil Peart or somebody, but somewhere along the line I became a singer. But I've always wanted to do the rock and roll for a living, that's for sure.
Now, Rob, your early music career consisted of doing a number of gigs. As I read your bio, as you mentioned, you were a drummer, became vocalist. Now, you did a lot of cover gigs. Two of your bands being the Robert Allen Band and, of course, Vice. Now, Vice is where you met IMPELLITTERI, right?
Yeah, that's right. We were in the Robert Allen Band opening up for Greg Allman in a club in Connecticut. And Chris was there, and he introduced himself after the show and said, "Hey, man, we need to get together and write some music." So I said, "Well, I'll be down here tomorrow." And he came down the next day, and we were hanging out at the club, and he just plugged in. And from that second on, I was like, "Man, this guy is a monster." And then that's when we started working together. He joined Vice for about a year, and we continued playing covers and original songs. And that's how we met.
So it seems like you guys hit it off immediately, right? So whose initial idea was to create that first EP?
That would have been Chris. Chris was Chris went out to L.A. before I did, and he was trying to put a band together, and he wasn't satisfied out there. But when I went out there for the M.A.R.S project gig, I was out there for a while. That gig ended up falling apart, and Chris still needed a singer, so he said, "Hey, man, come record these songs with me. Help me write these songs and make a demo for the labels and stuff." So that's how that came about.
Man, so you released a demo with IMPELLITTERI and then went on to join and recorded the Intense Defense album with the group Joshua, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that was supposed to be the big time right there. We had a manager that also was managing Kiss, and he was managing the band at the time, and we were recording with Dieter Dierks of Scorpions fame, and we ended up going to Germany for like 6 months recording that album, Intense Defense, and it was on RCA Records worldwide. So, at the time, I thought that was going to be it, and I was in that band about 2 years.
I mean, that's a big, famous band, a well-known band. I'm assuming you learned a lot about your songwriting playing for Joshua.
Yeah, Joshua's a great songwriter. And, we were good friends, and we still are, and we wrote some great songs together, but he's definitely a very melodic writer, and I think I picked up, when I was working with him, more melody in my vocal lines and stuff like that. He helped tune me in on that.
So at that time, so you recorded the EP with Chris, and then you had a decision to make whether to stay with Chris or join Joshua. How is that? How did you come to the decision? Were you struggling with what move you should make at that time?
I was. M.A.R.S Project Driver, Rudy and Tommy just left for Whitesnake, and I had moved from the East Coast to the West Coast to do this project, and thought it was going to be the next big thing, of course. And so I was pretty down about that. And at that point, I decided, you know what, I don't want to keep doing the same thing I've been doing in all the club years. And then I came out here to big rock star, and I said, I was listening to my Christian roots, to be honest, and I thought I should get back to that. And Joshua was a Christian band. They're on RCA Records with Dieter Dierks and Howard Marks, the management, and I just thought maybe this is where God wanted me to be, so I joined Joshua for a couple years. Meanwhile, Chris was shopping that demo, and I didn't know all the ins and outs of those couple years there, but obviously he got a deal with Relativity and did an album with Graham Bonnet. They put a band together for him, and he did very well. In the meantime, I was, spending time on that Intense Defense record for RCA Records.
Yeah, like I mentioned, Joshua had some talent on that roster. They had a co-vocalist named Jeff Fenholt who had an involvement with Jesus Christ Superstar, right?
Yeah, he was there just before me. And when he left, Ken Tamplin was in that band at the same time. And Ken Tamplin's another great musician and singer. And at that time of the Joshua band, when I was there, it was me and Ken Tamplin and Joshua, Greg Schultz on keys, Emil Brando on bass. And it was really a great band. And we thought we were going to do some huge things until, RCA dropped the ball on us. So.
And how come RCA dropped the ball? What happened there?
Well, originally it was supposed to come out RCA Worldwide. Then they decided to do it RCA Germany. Dieter Dirks and Joshua both had a problem with that, so they were going back and forth for a long time, trying to negotiate other deals in other territories. And in the end, it just caused so much friction in the band that we ended up going our separate ways, and that's when I went back and tried to regroup a driver band with Roy Z at that time, in I think it was 1989. I started that with Roy Z and a couple guys from the Joshua band.
We're talking with legendary vocalist Rob Rock, frontman for Impellitteri, who's on the telephone line. Rob, you mentioned the project called M.A.R.S. What do you remember most about working on that project? I know you also worked on the album Project Driver, right?
Right, yeah. M.A.R.S. Project Driver. M.A.R.S. was McAlpine, Aldridge, Rock, and Sarzo, and Project Driver ended up being the name of the album. Yeah, they flew me out to California, and I auditioned, and I got the gig, and then I moved out there, and then we went up to Fresno, California with Mark Varney at the helm, and he recorded the album up there at I think it was Prairie Sun Studios up there, because his boy Tony McAlpine was there, and that's where they recorded Tony's solo album, so everyone was familiar with that. So we recorded the M.A.R.S. Project Driver. I mean, it got great receptions, but the labels thought it was too heavy for the radio at the time, and they were just hemming and hawing about it. And it ended up coming out on Shrapnel Records instead because Whitesnake, David Coverdale recruited Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge for the 1987 Whitesnake videos and touring, and made them an offer they couldn't refuse. So they decided to drop their project, their band that they had started, which was M.A.R.S. Project Driver, and go on with David Coverdale. So there I was out in the streets in L.A. with no band, recording with Chris on the Black EP, meanwhile wanting to be in a Christian band. So I had sent a demo tape to Joshua and Dieter Dirks, and they loved it. So I ended up joining that band while Chris was shopping around. And, I wasn't sure what was going to happen with Chris, but at that point, it was just me and Chris in the band, and Ronnie Silva on drums, and Ted Days on bass, a couple of guys from L.A. So we weren't sure what that was doing, so I jumped on the definite RCA worldwide release thing, and also being in a Christian band was where I wanted to be and focus on that. So that's what I decided to do at the time,
Yeah, so this is like the mid '80s, I guess late '80s, and I'm assuming. I mean, you're well known. You recorded a demo with Impellitteri, so you're playing with Joshua. I'm assuming your momentum was pretty solid. I mean, you were well sought after at that time, no?
Yeah, I was getting a lot of calls. I actually did an album with Axel Rudy Pyle called Nasty Reputation, and I flew out to Germany. I was out there for like a week, and basically I just sang that album live in the studio and went home. I never even heard the playbacks. But those guys were bouncing off the wall. They loved it. I think my voice was in prime shape. And when that album came out on SPB Steamhammer over there in Europe, it did great. So, yeah, I was on fire at the time, and things were going well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rudy Sarzo, who you played with, and also, did you play with Craig Goldie, who played for Dio, right?
Yeah, well, Craig was in the Project Driver as well. You know, Craig was there when Jeff Fenholt was there, and I think that was just before I got there. I think after Craig left, they got Tony McAlpine, and Tony said, "Hey, I know this guy back east because me and Tony are from the same kind of area back in Massachusetts." And he said, "Maybe you should check him out." So they checked me out, and I ended up flying out there and with no preparation, just start singing with them in the studio, in the rehearsal studio. They just said, "Okay, we're going to jam, and you're going to just sing whatever you want to sing over this." And that was the audition. So it was nerve-wracking to say the least, but it was a very exciting time for me. I thought that was it, man. Here I am playing with the Blizzard of Oz rhythm section. This is going to be happening, bro. You know, it was great. And that gave me enough momentum to move my whole club thing I had going on back east, because we were playing 5-6 nights a week. We had the truck, the PA, the road crew, the whole thing going on back then. And it was a big decision, but it was really a no-brainer for me to go to LA at the time.
So, how would you explain like the difference in crowd between the East Coast, West Coast? They gravitate to your music. It's a big difference, huh?
Yeah, there's a big difference. Yeah, the East Coast is more. Let's see. When I was in the clubs, I mean, we had a huge following, so I knew a lot of the people that were following us, and to this day, I still know them. You know, especially when we did that Vice reunion, I got to see a lot of old friends again, and that was great. So when I was out in LA it was more like everything seemed to go so much quicker. It was like, flash, here you are, flash, there you are there, here you are there, you know, and especially on the Strip there, we played the Whiskey, we were hanging out the Rainbow, we were doing the whole scene there was really outrageously crazy back then. I wish it was still going, but I didn't know at the time that was just going to be once in a lifetime era, you know. I thought it was going to last forever.
So those were the good days, huh? Those,
yeah,
you missed
I
those
was a
times.
kid. I didn't know, you know. I thought it was going to last forever. I thought, oh, this is it. This is life, you know.
And I do want to get this in because, you obviously played with great guitarists. You played with Roy Z and Pelleteri. How would you describe the difference in sound between those two guitarists, especially when you're the front man?
Well, I think the main difference between Chris and Roy is Chris is hyper-focused on his guitar, his technique, his speed, and he writes everything in that vein. And basically, I jump on his train and write the melodies and lyrics to fit that. And Roy Z, on the other hand, is more of a songwriter guy, where he's like, go ahead, sing something. I want to sing. So I would start singing, maybe some lyrics I had, some melody ideas, and then he would write songs around it. And also he had some great songs, too, which were deeply melodic and catered around the vocalist more. So I think that was the main difference.
That's an interesting comparison. Now, when someone mentions to me Rob Rock, what comes to my mind, Rob, is Rage of Creation. That's really what I consider an introduction to your talented vocals. That was your first album, right, as a solo artist, released in 2000, right?
Yeah, that was. Definitely was. That was those were a lot of songs me and Roy wrote together in, I think it was like 89, 90. After I left Joshua, we wrote a lot of those songs together in Driver, and we ended up not getting signed with Driver. So what happened was when we got together, when I got an offer to do a solo career, in Japan, that's where it started. We had all these songs, and me and Roy just looked at each other and says, "Man, these are great songs. Let's record these songs," and that's what we did.
Yeah, and also making a special guest appearance was former Ozzy Osbourne guitarist, right, Jake Lee, on that album.
Oh, on the yeah, Media Machine. Yep, that was the main one he was on. Yeah, he came down to the studio. It was basically Joe Floyd's studio. from Warrior. I don't know if you know about Joe Floyd, but he's the guitarist in Warrior, and he has his own studio, Supercloud, where a lot of good things were happening down there in L.A. So I went in there with that, and laid it down with Roy Z and in Joe Floyd's studio.
Amazing. And I also have a little clip that I want to air now, which is one of my favorite videos of you performing. I want to air it now. Let's hear Rob rock.
Voices in the shadows, whispers in the night, telling him that vengeance will make everything alright. Tortured as a child, condemned by all his fears, thoughts that have no reason, and a heart that's full of fear.
Amazing stuff. You just heard Streets of Madness, Rob Rock, and with us is Rob Rock. Amazing, powerful voice there, Rob. Great material.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, that album was like a dream come true for me to finally get out a solo album, and it was exciting, to finally get. And I was lucky to get to go on and make, a total of four albums and a live video in that live album with that. So I appreciate the fans,
Oh, absolutely. What does one do to keep their voice, in good shape? A lot of practice, a lot of training. What type of regimen do you have?
Well, it depends on where I'm at. If I'm on the road, it's I actually go the opposite way. I go minimum. I try not to waste notes because I'm so busy trying to get sleep, which is like the only antidote to being traveling all the time. That really kills me with the buses and the planes. I really got to focus on staying healthy and eating good, staying away from smoking and stuff like that. I can't do the smoking and drinking. I gotta focus on the voice. So it's like a 24-hour regiment where you can't have as much fun as everybody else in the band. You know what I mean? Right.
And, I have like 4 minutes left, so I want to get this in. The new IMPELLITTERI release, Wake the Beast. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's a 3 CD compilation on Global Rock Records, and it's released finally worldwide, where everyone in the States can pick it up easily from Target or Amazon or whatever. And in the past, the IMPELLITTERI releases were mainly Japan and Europe, and it was hard for people to get them in the States, or at least they had to pay an arm and a leg to get them. So now you can get a 3 CD compilation of, of all the favorite songs from the fans anyway, that are on that CD. You can pick it up real easy. And finally, you can pick it up real easy. So that was an answer to a lot of requests from fans over the years to make our music more accessible. And Global Rock was the label that approached us and said, "Hey, man, we can do it, and we can do it right." So we decided to finally do that.
And the listening audience can pick it up on Amazon.com as well?
Yeah, yep. And plus, I believe it's on the the iTunes and all the Spotify and all the internet radio stuff. So,
all right, cool.
So, Impellitteri wasn't released before like that, but now it is.
So, besides this current project that you completed, what's down the pipeline for you? What do you have going on in your world?
In my world, I'm writing songs with a couple people, just tinkering away, keeping busy. I'm waiting right now to get the tracks for the new Impellitteri album from Chris, and once I get that, I'll be super focused on making that record happen, and so we'll be doing a new Impellitteri record very soon, and then I think it's coming out in 23, and hopefully we'll do some touring and some festival dates.
Yeah, my final question, Rob, you must have seen, you've been in this business now for 40 years or so. You must have seen so many changes. Besides the digital age, what other major changes have you seen in the business that you think it's affecting the industry? Anything?
I think the fact that there's no local touring type thing going on. I mean, when I was coming up, there was bands playing every weekend or even all week long at certain bars, and and as a young people, we can go out and party with the bands and to get to know the bands, and the bands can perform. But nowadays, I don't see any new bands performing. I don't see any new bands out and about like it was in the old days. And I think the biggest thing is that was kind of like our stomping ground. That's kind of where you learned your craft. I mean, I learned by learning cover songs and playing live in clubs. That was my, that was my training session before I went out to LA and had to learn, the recording side of it. And I think in today's digital world, bands are probably trying to record first, but they don't have any live experience. They don't have any feedback from fans, and it's a whole different approach,
And for an up and coming artist, a musician, is it still very difficult to get involved in a good band? You have to know people, connections. Is that how it still works?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure how it works for younger guys, how they're connecting. I would assume they're connecting online somehow, but I
because
think the local garage band to me is the way it should be.
Yeah, because in the past, if you knew a musician playing for a band, they would ask you to sit in for them. I don't know if that's still how it works today.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's not a lot of live gigs going on, playing out wise. People aren't playing out a lot, so there's not a lot of time for interaction, with other musicians. There is online, but not live in your face stuff. And I think that's
right.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, it was great talking with you, Brian. Thank you.
No problem. Take care of yourself. The legendary Rob Rock. Until next week, happy collecting to all.